Senate budget, there is no increase in funding. They sweep that new administrative support money set aside, excuse me, and they also increased the regional funding cap from 650 to 750. And they do permit the Go Virginia Board to move funds between the accounts in order to accommodate that minimum. Some other differences in other areas. We add language in the VATI, the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative, to make it more cost effective. And we provide an appeals process for the broadband providers after our hearing we had here with GHCD, speaking to some of the participants in the program, came up with some language. The Senate just increases the funding, $4 million for the biennium for the program. House includes new funding for the Chief Broadband Advisor, that's in HB 1583. Senate increases authorization for the VDIG program up to $15 million. The Senate also increases funding for the enterprise zone, 1.37, and we just level funded at the current 25.6. In tourism, we both increased the funding for Spearhead Trails, the House by $500,000, the Senate only by $100,000. We also provide $100,000 each year for the Colville Regional Tourism Authority so that they can leverage an equal amount of matching funds from the Economic Development Authority. The House budget eliminates a new Richmond Raceway Tourism Initiative, and the Senate budget keeps that and includes $100,000 for the biennium for the Williamsburg Tourism Initiative. In technology, we have most of the amendments that transfer the Office of the Secretariat of Technology to the Secretariats of Administration and Commerce and Trade. And both the House and Senate budgets do include funding using the repurposing that funding for a new Chief Data Officer. The Senate intends to follow through with bulk of these transfers of these responsibilities to these various areas. But the House budget also includes funding for two new deputy secretaries, one for each secretariat, using those repurposed funds to assist with the oversight in the new secretariat for the technology responsibilities that they're about to inherit.
Skip, before you sit down, I think it's important to go back to the third bullet point on fourth one. The Senate increased the authorization for VDIG but didn't put any money, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so it wasn't funded.
What the program itself funds our obligations every year, but this is just authorization.
Right, but we allocate dollars to make sure there's money
Correct.
in the bank for the authorizations that are issued.
Correct.
Okay. So we'll make sure I haven't missed anything. Ann, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Moving to slide 41 in agriculture and forestry. Overall, the actions in the two bodies were very similar and contained few amendments. And House Bill 29, both moved a proposed increase of $1.6 million in DGIF. Overall in House Bill 30, there's about $1 million swing with the House adding about $675,000 and the Senate cutting just over $225,000. At Department of Agriculture, both added language related to VDOT grant program legislation. The House also provided $250,000 over the biennium grants, and the Senate includes $1.5 million non-general fund for the self-assessed cattle industry fund for legislation they had. At forestry, both funded the full match on the industry contributions to the reforestation of timberlands program. The Senate eliminated an initiative to provide $236,000 for containerized pine seedlings, and the House provided $100,000 each year for the Natural Resources Leadership Institute. Moving to natural resources, the House budget included net reductions of $2.6 million. Senate had reductions of $1.1 million. Both fully fund the WQIF deposit. The Senate also provides new funding of $5.2 million over the biennium for the reserve. This would come from VDOT gas tax revenues that are related to unrefunded marine fuels. In terms of similar items in the two budgets, you'll see reductions for land preservation programs in both. The House eliminated first year funding only for the VLCF of $4.5 million and fully funded the second year. The Senate eliminated $3 million from each year, leaving $1.5 million each year for that program, and they also eliminated the full $4 million over the biennium for the BLF that's used for their operating costs. Both bodies proposed increases in funding for oyster replenishment. The Senate provided an additional $1.75 million, the House an additional $1 million. At the bottom of the page, you'll see two similar savings actions taken in both budgets. Some other House amendments. The House provided $300,000 over the biennium to hire two additional engineers to help the soil and water conservation districts implement Ag-BMP project. And then the House included a number of one-time initiatives related to water quality, $500,000 for the biennium to evaluate concerns with Cannon Creek on Lynnhaven River, $403,000 for the Elizabeth River State of the River scorecard. I think Tony mentioned the Senate included some funding at VIMS instead of a DEQ for that project, and just over $319,000 for the Skeleton Center of wastewater treatment. House amendment also included one-time land acquisitions of existing parks. There was the acceptance of a small piece of land at no cost at Natural Tunnel State Park, and $120,000 was provided to acquire some land at New River State Park. The House also transferred $1.35 million each year of the sales tax revenues that otherwise would go to the game department and sent them instead to the Marine Resources Commissions to address related issues related to boating access. In terms of Senate amendments, the largest spending related to amendments to open phases of two new state parks. There's $1.6 million and 6 positions for Whitewater State Park Phase 1 and $336,000 and 2 positions for 7 Bend State Park. There are no questions.
Any questions for Ann? No? Thank you. Please proceed.
I can't keep my slides up. I'm sorry, sir. Moving next to transportation. First with the Department of Motor Vehicles, the largest difference in transportation is the House inclusion of new revenue to offset DMV's growing cost. The House authorized a title fee increase of $10, which generates $26 million each year. The new Senate funding includes $1.6 million from increasing the vital records fees offered at DMV from $2 to $8, as well as $600,000 from the Department of Corrections for issuing identification to inmates. Both try to address the issues of Real ID implementation and scale back DMV's request to fund that in terms handled in slightly different ways. The House budget removed 10 positions authorized in the caboose bill and 29 authorized in House Bill 30. The Senate removes an equal number of positions but does that in the big bill. The Senate bill also reduces the line of credit requested from $20.7 million down to $10.5 million. The House left the overall cap on the line of credit the same, but included a series of quarterly reporting requirements prior to any drawdown from those funds to give you some authority over how they're spending the money. Both bodies adopted similar language amendments listed on the bottom of that page. In the Secretary's office and at VDOT, the House offered a series of language amendments related to a variety of topics outlined here, specifically reinserted language related to project labor agreements that have been included in Chapter 836. Called for a review of I-81 project prioritization. While there's not language in the Senate budget, they do have a similar proposal in standalone legislation. The House included 2 language amendments related to tolling on I-66 inside the Beltway, and then language related to a sound wall on Highway 13 in Virginia Beach. Senate as well had a series of specific language amendments related to the American Legion Bridge, a report on special structures that would direct VDOT to use different smart sale criteria for a series of enumerated specific bridge and tunnel projects. They add language instructing VDOT to change its method of allocating maintenance funds to the 2 counties that are outside of the state system to more strictly comport with the code. And there's also language related to an accessibility study of the Richmond Port. At the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, took rather similar actions. Both budgets removed the requested $110 million in bonds to support statewide transit capital needs. The House budget did go forward though and direct the RPT and Treasury to establish a working group to try to examine the potential use of the NUP program for pooled bus purchases. Both budgets remove funding associated with the mod funding proposals that have been included in the introduced budget, with the assumption on both sides that appropriate language and funding will be reflected pending resolution of the standalone WMATA bills. The House included a series of language amendments geared towards expediting transit prioritization methodologies and replicating what you all have done in Smart Scale in recent years. The Senate did not have similar language in the budget, but again, there was some reference to that in their standalone WMATA bill. And similarly, the House did separate out allocations for WMATA from the other transit providers to ensure that their share of the pot does not grow over time, and the Senate included language in the WMATA bill addressing that issue. Lastly, the Virginia Port Authority. The House provided a total of $350 million from a combination of cash and bond authorizations to advance and fully fund first the planning and preliminary engineering requirements, but then the full cost of the widening and dredging of the Norfolk Harbor Channel to 55 feet and the southern branch of the Elizabeth River to 45 feet. The Senate included only the $20 million required for the preliminary engineering and design for that project. The Senate budget also removed funding and positions that had been in the introduced budget as introduced to support the growing operations at the BPA facilities. They eliminated a total of 21 positions and $4 million of non-general funds. There are no questions?
Any questions for Ann? If not, Dave?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Starting with the Department of Corrections on slide 50, both budgets have a restoration for inmate health care. The House restores $5.7 million the first year based upon the January 1st effective date for Medicaid transformation. The Senate budget restores the full $44.1 million over the biennium that will assume savings in the introduced budget. The House budget adds $3 million the second year to address the department's shortfall in base operating funding. The most substantial Senate savings action reduces funding for inmate health care by $6 million over the biennium, which is their assumed savings from requiring any hospital contracting with the department to accept Medicaid rates for the treatment they provide to inmates. At the bottom of the slide just lists out each budget's DOC-related language amendments. For state fees, both budgets authorize the purchase of 2 replacement helicopters. The House budget makes a technical reduction of $1.9 million the first year, as the first amount payment isn't due until fiscal year 2020, and the second year amount that was in the introduced budget is still there. The Senate budget alternatively directs the state police to use $1.2 million of its insurance fraud fund proceeds for the purchase, and makes a corresponding reduction of $404,000 each year in the general fund amount provided for the melt payments. For e-summons, the House budget includes $1.9 million for a pilot rollout in the 7th Division. Both budgets have a Part 3 amendment prohibiting localities from assessing e-summons fees on summonses issued by troopers. However, the Senate language goes further and actually authorizes state police to assess a $5 e-summons fee of their own. The Senate also has a few amendments the House budget doesn't, including specifying that the tactical team positions would serve in the 6th Division, and using $800,000 from the Sex Offender Registry Fund to upgrade the department's background check system. For ABC, the Senate increases the net profit transfer by $1.4 million the first year and $4.6 million the second year. They did this not by changing the forecast, but rather by making the deductions listed here on the slide. In DCJS, the House provides $6.6 million the first year and $13.8 million the second year for additional HB 599 funding. The Senate provides $6.6 million each year, and is therefore $7.2 million below what the House provides in the second year. The House also includes $2.5 million the first year to extend the jail mental health pilot programs for an additional 12 months. The Senate provides $5 million and extends those throughout the biennium. I I won't read through this slide, but it shows that there are other small differences between budgets in other public safety agencies. There were also a few small differences between the House and Senate budgets in terms of the Veterans Affairs Fund. Finally, for the judiciary, the House provides $1.1 million each year to fill a total of 20 judicial vacancies, while the Senate budget includes no amendments related to judgeships. As for other spending items, the Senate swept half the funds included in the introduced budget for mental health dockets, and all of the funds included to expand drug treatment courts. The Senate budget also includes $525,000 each year for additional criminal fund waivers and $160,000 the second year for IT improvements in the court system.
Thank you, Dave. I believe, Tony, you're ready to clean up?
Michael's.
Michael's wife, okay.
On slide 57, the area of capital, Ann's already talked about the harbor widening and dredging. There was some slight difference in the Department of Behavioral Health on some of the safety issue projects. As well in state parks, the House provided $4 million for some infrastructure. The Senate did not. Both did the aviation support facilities. The Senate did that as a standalone, and you all had it in the pool. The capital pools were somewhat different, mainly just for the items that were included in there. Both of you included the ABC project. The Senate also included the capital complex project, and you had that as a standalone, as well as the JJ project is in there. You had that as a separate supplement as well. Moving down to the JJ, the third from the bottom, the House provides for a 156-bed facility at Beaumont. The Senate provides for 2 separate facilities, 36 beds at Bon Air and the 60-bed proposal at the Isle of Wight, and both do seat of government and the ABC project. In other capital projects, you do the State Police Area 13 barracks, as well as the Virginia Tech extension to Hampton Area Seafood Research Center. You also add for the equipment pool, for the Carilion and the CNU library. The Senate does the Carilion project in the equipment pool. None of the other projects, but they also do stormwater grants. Both of you defer the Alexandria CSO, and in maintenance reserve, the House makes adjustments for Fort Monroe, the Youth College, and Frontier Culture. In terms of project planning, both House and Senate save some dollars. The Senate saves $5 million, the House saves $15 million. You do basically all the same projects with the exception from non-general funds, with the exception that the Senate does not do the facilities annex or the new science building at Longwood and Norfolk State. Other than that, they're pretty much the same. Michael?
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Slide 61 shows the funding in 2 budgets for the revenue reserve. Both budgets fund $156 million in deposits in the current year, and then in the House budget, consistent with the provisions of House Bill 763 from the chairman, provided a deposit of $45.5 million in 19 and an additional $45.5 million in 20, for a total deposit of $247.4 million over the 3 years. Senate budget provides $45 million in 2019 and $135 million in 2020, for total deposits of $236 million over the 3 years. They also have, since they did not have standalone legislation, they have language in Part 4 that codifies the revenue reserve. It's the last amendment in their code. Slide 62 just shows the significant spending amendments in general government. The biggest difference is the Senate budget provides $5.4 million for DLAS to begin replacement of the legislative information system. The House budget did not fund this. We felt more information was needed to be provided to us over the upcoming year for funding the initiative. In addition to that, the other difference is the House budget includes significantly more compensation for the Norfolk Corps, and there was funding for compensation for Robert Paul Davis from House Bill 21010. Slide 63 just shows the differences in resource amendments for general government in the House and the Senate. The biggest difference is the House assumes $10.8 million in additional tax compliance revenue from funding for additional audit staffing above and beyond the 8 that were included in the introduced budget, and funding staffing in 2018 to maximize revenues in 2019. The last slide just shows savings amendments in the two budgets. The biggest amendment in the biggest reduction in the Senate budget was that they reduced by $3.3 million over the biennium the general fund provided to the Department of Elections for the HAVA backfill related to the loss of federal funding. And slide 65 just shows language amendments in the Senate budget. The Senate budget includes language related to localities that have police officers who wear body cameras, and it requires the locality to hire an entry-level assistant Commonwealth attorneys on their dime at the ratio of 1 attorney for every 50 body cameras, and their language says the compensation board shall establish the salary. The Senate budget also includes language directing the tax department to convene a work group to study the AST and the phasing out of it, the policy implications.
Finally, Mr. Chairman, we're just trying to summarize some of the changes on the revenue side of the equation. In terms of House Bill, Senate Bill 29, they were quite similar. You can see there were identical transfer actions. The House did pick up some additional prior year legislative balances, as well as balances from the SEC and Department of Social Services, giving us just under $1 million extra in the first year, or the current year, I should say. In terms of the big bill, again, bodies took identical action related to the extending caps on land preservation and historic preservation tax credits. The House did pick up $3.4 million, reflecting the utility rate credit the state will receive for state facilities pursuant to House Bill 1558. As Michael mentioned, picked up just under $11 million a year and assumed additional tax collections by authorizing the hiring of 4 additional auditors at the Department of Taxation and the Boost bill, and that's carried forward in the big bill. The Senate did not pick up that revenue. The remainder under revenues are related to pieces of legislation that have been adopted by either body. Moving down to transfers, you see some similarities. The Senate did identify $4 million in savings from the telephone relay service, DEF in Southwest Virginia. On the final page, as Michael mentioned, the Senate generated about $6 million in revenues by reducing the appropriations for the operating expenses of ABC, and assuming that these would flow directly to the general fund in the form of profits. They also generated $2.6 million each year, which, as I mentioned, would go to the Water Quality Improvement Fund Reserve by taking an estimate of unrefunded motor fuels from the Transportation Trust Fund revenues. In total, you'll see on the House side, the changes in resources came to about $41.2 million over the biennium, $42.1 million in the Senate, so very similar. Net spending over the biennium, the House spent an additional $55 million, the Senate an additional $46.1 million. And at the bottom, you'll see the unappropriated balances by year in the two budgets.
Are there any questions for Ann? If not, I want to thank you. Well, committee, that's the side-by-side that we typically do for the new conferees. There's much work to be done. You can see staff has laid out for us side-by-side, and we'll begin the process once the Senate announces their conferees. We'll officially get these into conference by tomorrow evening. House Bill 29 and House Bill 30. Anything else? Any members have any comments or observations? If not, the committee shall rise.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think HHR follows, we'll get 5 minutes or so, sir.
Okay. HHR will follow. Give them a 5-minute break. So around, let's see, 3:30.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
I'll let you know. Okay. All right.
How are you? That's kind of how here, half the battle.
I saw it.
Speak to Susan real quick.
You still have the stuff in there? No. Maybe you go on top of it. Okay, got it. Right. Absolutely. Sure, absolutely. I did that. Oh, did you talk to him? Hey, how are you? Good. Thanks for your help. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon. Members will take their seat. Everybody but Delegate Ayers. All right, I see Senator Stanley. Stanley, you have a committee that needs to be structurally continued so that we can get all of our House members where they need to be, sir, with affirmative actions on their bills.
Yes, sir. Affirmative indeed.
Yes, sir. I draw the committee's attention to, we'll call to order the Health and Human Resources Subcommittee of House Appropriations Committee for the afternoon. I draw the committee's attention to Senate Bill 27. Senator, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
If you could just tell us why we need your bill and what it does.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 27 is a simple bill, but it actually takes what we do in getting the block grant money from the TANF fund, the temporary assistance for needy families. You would know, and certainly we do in the monetary side of what we do, that we do not use all of those monies up. And what we're doing is temporary assistance is welfare, is trying to help families in those gap situation and the safety net that need it the most. And what we do, unfortunately, is we perpetuate the cycle of poverty because it's just enough to get by, but it doesn't change their lives. It sustains what they have and make sure that they don't drop any farther down. What we did here is create a scholarship program, and as a pilot program that would have allowed for scholarship use of some of that block grant money that was unused. to create scholarships to allow children who are coming from TANF eligible families in both a rural setting and an urban setting to then receive a scholarship of up to $4,000, which would basically pay for their associate's degree and those expenses in our community college system, using the community college in the pilot program in a rural setting and also in an urban setting. What we're trying to do is break the cycle of poverty, and in doing so, by breaking the cycle of poverty, create a taxpayer who's a tax benefit, who's a societal benefit, not a tax burden on our system. And when you can do that, especially in our area, create those educational opportunities, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for those children that don't have them anymore, that are living as I've told you before, Mr. Chairman, in my area, the average per capita income for a family of four is $28,600. You're barely thinking about whether you put clothes on your back and your shoes for your children and a roof over your head and then food. Most of those children are not given the opportunity or even talked about the opportunity that college could bring to them and what kind of benefit they could have. I'm reminded of my father, who died a month after I graduated from college, who was so poor, from such a poor family, they didn't even consider college. He was class valedictorian. He took a scholarship with the Navy, NROTC, so that he could go to college. And I asked him what motivated him to do it. And he said, I went into the Navy so you wouldn't have to. I made sure that I was going to get this education, be the first one to get a college education in my family, so that I could do that for my children without them having to do what I had to go through. When I think of that, and that's the attitude that we grew up with, that we're all going to do better than our parents because that's what they tell us, and what we have today when those chances are not, and those opportunities aren't even present because, quite frankly, the wall in front of these children that are TANF eligible is that they're never going to see the American dream until they climb over that 20-foot wall. This gives them that chance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, sir. Members have any questions of the agent and Delegate Landry?
Mr. Chairman, it's interesting, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I think we had a similar House Bill 285 that was tabled by this subcommittee, and I'm trying to determine, Mr. Chairman, I see that there's an $800 million non-federal fund impact potentially. 800,000, excuse me. 800 million.
No wonder it was
That's real money. But just trying to determine the fiscal impact, wanting to know, I know the bill also has the clause on it, Senator Stanley, was there some accounting for the legislation in the Senate budget?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I can tell you that, oh, he's not here. Senator Hanger was just here. Oh, there he is. I put in a budget amendment to cover the amount of the pilot program, and he'd like to speak individually, but my understanding was through my review of the budget amendments, that did not make it. But I'll keep trying.
All right, sir.
I'll never say die.
Yes, sir. Delegate Landry asked questions. Right. Any further questions? Anyone in the audience to speak in favor of Senate Bill 27? Yes, sir. Come on up. Identify yourself, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill Ray with the Virginia Catholic Conference. We support this bill. We think it would provide important educational opportunities to help break the cycle of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in support? Anyone in opposition to Senate Bill 27? If not, Senator, one of the things that we've done over the last several years is to try to get our arms around, and as you quite appropriately and accurately said, there is a balance in that fund. One of the challenges we have is the cycling of our business cycles and the challenges. And some years it's underutilized, and in some years it becomes an even greater burden. We also talked about, as I recall, in addressing Delegate Murphy's House Bill 285, sort of the nexus of directly to the four elements of TANF, but as opposed to an educational scholarship program. And there's a nexus because it's for low-income folks, but as far as looking at unwed pregnancies and two-member mom and dad families and those kinds of things. Also want to say before, the Lord gives you one mom and one dad, and I'm sorry for your loss. Your dad at a younger age, but still.
Oh, he affects everything I do, and I can tell you, I'm grateful for the opportunity that he didn't have, that he made for himself, that he then gave to me and my sister. And that's what motivates me on these kind of things. Understand this, though. In this program, it's covered and approved by the federal government to be used for federal monies that we give to the states to be used for that. So it's not a fly-by-night thing. So if when we find a way and a funding source for this, I think you will find that it may be just one of the best things that's ever done for those kids that otherwise don't have a chance.
Well, I certainly respect your advocacy.
Mr. Speaker,
Don't stop.
speaking to the result.
Yes, sir.
I have a couple concerns, particularly with the TANF funds used for this. We do have a structural imbalance in the TANF funds. We're spending more every year that we bring in, and then to put this new obligation on the TANF funds, I think it's putting us at risk if we were to have another downturn in the economy and our mandatory requirements were to go up. I do say, I got to take a little bit of an exception to the story that you relate. I went into the Navy to have them fund my education. I actually think that's an outstanding way to do it, and I wouldn't say that I would not want my kids to take and do the same thing. I think actually going into the military is an outstanding way for folks to get out of poverty, and particularly folks in rural areas to take and get an education that perhaps sometimes they could take back. So to say that that would be something that they could do so their kids would never have to do it, that's not quite what I think we should be putting forward. I think the
Mr.
military
Chairman,
is
Delegate
an
Solid,
outstanding way to.
that is not what I meant. I'm a very proud son of a naval officer, an aviator who served in the Vietnam War 3 tours. I got an NRTC scholarship. I was going into the Navy. He just had a mindset that he wanted me to go to Hampton City because he wanted me to fulfill a dream to become a lawyer. And as he was dying the last 4 years of his life, he said, I went into the Navy so you would have the opportunity not to have to. That was my choice ultimately what I decided to do, and I went to Hampton City based on what his desires were. His other desire was when he died that my mother would kind of achieve her dream. She always wanted to be a lawyer, but women didn't go to school back in the 50s and 60s because they weren't allowed. And so when he passed away, I encouraged her to fulfill her dream. She went and finished her undergraduate, went to law school, and I made a promise to her that she would become, when she became a lawyer and passed the bar, that I would leave whatever firm I was at and we would start a law firm together. So at the age of 59, based on what my father's idea was of how important education was, whether it was from a military benefit or not, at 59 she passed the bar, and at the age of 78 right now, she's still my partner today. I left the firm in Arlington and we started a practice together, and I'm proud to call her not just my mother, but my law partner.
All right, any further questions? All right, committee works by motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we gently lay this on the table.
Oh, just slam it on the table. It's jelly stuff.
Properly moved and seconded that Senate Bill 27 be gently laid on the table. All the members vote on electronic voting to that motion. And the motion to lay on the table passes on a 5-3 vote. All right, so in Senator Stanley, you also have Senate Bill 225.
Yes, another.
On the committee's attention, Senate Bill 225.
Look, ladies and gentlemen, I think why this is important and what we did, and that's why the Senate passed, of course, had the clause as well, but we have a very serious opioid addiction. Dr. Garrett, I think, and Delegate Garrett, you can understand, especially in our region, how it has devastated an already hurting region. You know, 20, 30 years ago, we had the lowest unemployment rate, highest levels of income, lowest poverty rates. Now, because of NAFTA and CAFTA telling us tobacco is bad, we shouldn't grow it, and now coal is bad, what we've seen is unemployment rise, despair rise. One out of 3 children are living at or below the poverty level, and that never occurred in this area. We were the economic driver. What the resulting thing is we've seen is, especially with this crisis that we've seen nationwide, is an overprescription and overconsumption of opioids. And in our area, we unfortunately had the distinction of we're trying to bring our area back and trying to bring industry to our area. And then it comes out with a study that says that Martins, the city of Martins, the once great center of industry, textile manufacturing, has the highest consumption per milligram, per person, per capita in the nation. And so the problem that I looked at over the summer, and we really worked on this all summer, was that what we were finding was that the only time that people at or below the poverty level would get any kind of adequate treatment, or even treatment options, was usually when they came in contact with the court system. I can tell you I do indigent defense work for one county, just as charity work for the judges who asked me to. But I also do in my private practice those that, who come to me and are charged with crimes. If they could afford it, if they could afford to go into inpatient rehab, the chances of them overcoming this opioid addiction was 70–80% of all my clients. If they couldn't afford it, if they lived at or below the poverty level, the chances of relapse was near 100%. The chance of recovery was next to nothing. We don't have drug courts and specialized ways to treat them. our treatment and detox, what we call detox in my area, when they come in touch with the court system, it's called jail. And what we have is our community service boards that are overworked. They get every referral from the courthouse. Piedmont Community Services, it's every referral from the judges. Probation, even non-probation, they're overworked. And what we had is, quite frankly, some accountability issues with the hospitals, where they, in meetings with them, they kind of said, yeah, we need to be held, not just accountable, but finding the solution. So what this bill tried to do is we came together and we sat down and worked out a 3-step plan, using the contribution of the hospital for the bricks and mortar detoxification. Just by way of example, Sova Health had 2 people. There's a myocardial poisoning of the heart that happens, but really, you know what the word is. I don't, Doc. But, and so they had to keep them in for 45 days to detox and really kind of heal the heart. Well, they knew both of these people, at cost of $750,000, were going out and reusing the day they got released, which meant it was a waste of our taxpayer money, and this was $0 compensation. So what they said was, look, we'll handle the detox and then work with our CSBs in combination to make sure that we do not relapse for recovery, post-detox recovery, and then maintenance. And then in talking to Karen Rubin, who heads up the UVA telemental health program, I sit on that board. We said, wait a minute, how do we keep that going where the maintenance part, where like a doc in a box or therapist in a box, where we can really use those telemedicine, telehealth ideas in rural areas where someone can't reach out to a support group instantaneously, to help in that maintenance, to make sure relapse doesn't happen, to encourage healthy lives, to get them involved in their health care. So we came up with a 3-tiered system that is absolutely planned out. And part of my bill said, this is a public-private partnership. That the piece that would be donated by the hospital, being the bricks and mortar and their costs, would be their cost to bear. Because what we're trying to avoid is those 2 people coming in at $750,000 for 45 days just to go out and reuse and come back, unfortunately, either on a stretcher or with a blanket and a sheet over. So we came up with a really specific system where we think it's a great plan. Part of the funding would be, we looked at state funding to fund the CSB's portion of it for recovery and maintenance, and even Dr. Rubin. Then we put even another additional piece in, which was the tobacco commission. Those are state funds used for revitalization of our area, our footprint, where we have the highest opioid addiction rates, the highest death rates. In fact, we just had a study come out that they're going up, they're not going down. They're like Pillion, you and I know exactly what these are. We live with them every day. We see them every day. And this is sick. It's just something we're trying. Because instead of just saying, let's put them in jail, they'll detox, they go right back and they use it. We treat the detox in the heart, they go back right back and use it. So why not do something other than cutting off the supply sources through the PMP? That we actually do something at the addiction level, so that we're giving, again, someone who otherwise is full of hope, no hope and full of despair, an attempt to actually have a meaningful recovery program that the only reason they're not getting it is because of the financial situation or their zip code. And that's
All right, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate your ardent advocacy, Senator Stanley. Members have any questions of the senator? And I say that sincerely, sir. I'm not being flippant or jocular. I say this quite sincerely. No, I respect that, sir.
And I don't think, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to say, I don't think just expanded Medicaid gets there either. We've got to have an innovative system where we can, and also too, this doesn't have the patient-centered medical home that I once had on it. But we have to have collaborative efforts. We now put all of the disciplines together, where everybody gets together, where if we can do this, and it's a pilot program, in a pilot program situation, if we can make it work, we can take it anywhere. And we can have more involvement of the communities and their monies as well.
All right, sir. Delegate Landis.
Mr. First, let me say that I've never had the benefit of seeing Senator Stanley in the courtroom, but I expect it's quite the experience. So I commend him on his advocacy as you did on both these bills. And Senator Stanley, I think, alluded to this. This does have the clause as well, and I understand and think that this idea of the pilot program is a good one. The difficulty is you came up with a piece from the Tobacco Commission, but I don't believe the Senate included anything for the state share related to the pilot, if I understand kind of where the Senate budget is. Is that not correct?
Is there a difference between our two budgets? I've heard.
About $600 million.
What? When did that happen? You never never told us, did
And
Delegate
Pay attention.
And Senator, just also in all fairness, we also had House Bill 1507 that Delegate Adams very strenuously advocated for, and that was also tabled in the subcommittee. So.
I understand. That doesn't mean I'm not gonna come here and tell you, because I think ultimately we start a conversation where we need to do this. We're watching orphan kids. You know, talk about the rates of addiction and also the effect on our children and on their family members, and where we see it every day. I mean, if I get a case, Delegate Landers, Mr. Chairman, if you'll just indulge me for 1 second. If I get a case, a person comes in on a court-appointed list, it's a bad check charge. I'm bringing into a shed and taking a lawnmower. I say, what are you on? And they tell me. I had a Sunday school teacher come in, Sunday school teacher, addicted to opioids, committed a crime, feed the addiction. I had a regular teacher come in with the same problem. It crosses over so many lines, and it does not limit itself to one section of our society. And it is growing, and if we don't get that tiger by the tail, it's going to be the death of us all.
Delegate Landis, yes, sir.
Let me just say, I agree with the senator on that, and I know Delegate Pillion and he and others have done a great deal of work, and I think we need to continue with this. But my concern is just the funding at this.
It's always about money with you, isn't it, Delegate Landis?
All right. And Mr. Chairman, I also want to say, I'm glad that I'm not a Commonwealth's attorney or assistant Commonwealth's attorney in the areas that you practice.
You were too kind, sir.
And-
They hate me just as much.
So
I want to try everything.
I have to say this, Senator Sanders.
But if you need me, give me a call. There we go, my card.
I have to say this, Senator Stanley, it is all about the money to Delegate Landis, except for when I saw the tears in his eyes this afternoon, when the House applauded and lauded the courage of one of our delegates, Delegate Ellsworth, his conflict, and seeing some of the travesties and some of the horrific things that only people can imagine. I saw the tears in Delegate Landis' eyes, so I think it's a little bit more about the money.
I have a big place in my heart for Delegate Landis. He knows that.
All right. Anyone in the audience to speak in favor of Senate Bill 225? Yes, sir. Come on forward. Please identify yourself.
One of the guys that did it with.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Greg Preston. I am the Executive Director with Piedmont Community Services Board. For the last 6 months or so, Piedmont Community Services and SOPA Health, once we saw that Martinsville had made national news, we started to put our heads together to figure out how do we treat our community. One of the things that we're missing is a full continuum of care in our area. In FY17 last year, out of 952 individuals that Piedmont served for substance use disorder, 520 of those were diagnosed with opiates. So it is a major concern for our area. One of the things that we wanted to do is to make sure that we followed Step Virginia in that mission. And also, how do we fulfill the gaps in services? What I noticed in Sunday's paper in Martinsville, the headline, it reads, "Drug problem grows worse in local area." Speaking of Martinsville and Henry County, what the West Piedmont Health District discovered, and it covers Martinsville and the surrounding areas. It looked at data from September 17 to December 17. And what it saw for SOPA Health, it had an average of 15.3 emergency room visits, and they were unintentional overdoses. It also discovered 106 emergency room visits, which were related to overdoses. So we do have a problem. Piedmont, we're very excited to have a partner like SOPA Health and also Senator Stanley. And thank you for allowing me to make comments.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Anyone else to speak in favor of Senate Bill 225? Anyone in the audience to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 225? And Mr. Preston, before you sit down, I don't know if you've had a chance to sort of reach out to Evan Feynman and certainly Delegate Kilgore chairs the tobacco indemnification. I would certainly encourage you and the local folks there to reach out to Evan and make sure you're well on their plate. I'm sure the senator has, but coming from the community as well, it's important coming from the senator, but it's important coming from the community as well, sir. All right. Further questions of the senator? No? Not. Committee works by motion.
gently lay this on the table.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded that Senate Bill 225 be quite gently laid on the table. The members would vote on electronic voting.
I'll be back.
All right, that measure passes laid gently on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. What I really appreciate is that you allowed me to speak for this bill, even knowing it's fake. I appreciate that greatly.
Absolutely.
I appreciate all the work you've done.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your advocacy. Senator Hager. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now he's been teed up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before Senator Stanley leaves the room, I do appreciate his advocacy. You know, it is a tough call, but actually in the Martinsville area, they got a good partnership going there and created a program. They want it to be a pilot program. I think if we get enough money, we should just do it statewide, really, in terms of cooperation with the local providers, facilities, and so at any rate, yeah, they did a lot of good work there for that.
And draw the committee's attention to Senate Bill 539.
539. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Committee. This,
if you could just let us know what your bill does and why we need it.
okay. All right. Here's what the bill does, and it grew out of a study, a year-long study that was conducted in 2016, because there had been concern with a number of families, in particular parents who had lost children in daycare programs. Or had been injured, and there was concern about the proliferation of programs that were not licensed. Now, you saw the bill last year, and it almost went through the process. It got to the governor, and then he sent back an amendment that was not acceptable. This year, it's gone through quite an iteration in terms of where we've gone, but we basically came back to our primary goal that we wanted to identify the programs that are currently under exemption that are both licensed and unlicensed to give parents reliable information.
And Senator, I'm going to interrupt for just a second, John, or do we have amendments? Yes. I just want to make it its position.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The first amendment would be on line 32 of the substitute. After the enactment clause number 4, strike the remainder of line 322, all of line 323 through 332, and through enactment clause 6 on line 333. That's the first one. The second one would be at the beginning of line 337, substitute of the substitute, strike enactment number 7 and insert number 5.
And Susan, tell us what that'll do.
What that'll do essentially is get rid of the 2 enactment clauses that make the bill sort of contingent on funding. So enactment clause number 4 says the commissioner would prepare a plan to implement the provisions, which would include the projected cost of implementation and the availability of funds appropriated to them, report on that, and then the next one, enactment clause number 5, in the substitute would say that if they determine that there's additional funding that would be required in those amounts, but they don't have it, they essentially cease operation and come back and ask for it. If you determine that you want to adopt the bill, there is some funding that could be used out of the Child Care and Development Block Grant Fund to cover the cost of it.
Second.
All right. Without objection and by general consensus, it's properly adopted and properly amended and properly before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
And with that, since you adopted those amendments, I would explain that in the previous committee, before it came to appropriation, Delegate Orrock's committee, he had inserted a couple of things in one, and that was a provision basically to address cost. Well, after that, we basically deleted the primary drivers of cost, that being background checks. That's still something that is an issue to be resolved into the future, but we deleted the background checks, and we deleted requirements that would have required ESS to go through a regulation process relative to that. We did include from Delegate Orrock's committee some language that he wanted related to physical injury language, ratio updates, religious exempt sections, and a DSS report back to that committee on what they had done. Basically, the problem was that we have a lot of exempts out there that parents do not know their status, and they have no real requirements. So what we're doing, we want to set minimum standards for safety and health for these license exempt programs. No one will be losing their exempt status under provisions of this bill. And all licensed exempt child day programs under the provisions of this bill would have to file proof of exemption with the Commissioner of the Department of Social Services and disclose in writing to the parents that have children in these facilities or are using these facilities that they are exempt from licensure. That would be noted. They have to report to the Commissioner all incidents involving serious physical injury or death, and as I indicated, post a notice that they are operating with a licensed exempt program. All exempts also must comply with several things here, and I'll be quick with this. And I would state that currently all exempts, including religious exempts, certified private preschools, public school programs, and local government programs, already have versions of this, so they're not in this section. They already have to do these things. They have a person trained and certified in first aid. They have to maintain daily attendance records, have an emergency preparedness plan, and comply with all applicable laws and regulations governing transportation of children. As I indicated previously, we've deleted the background checks, which was the primary cost driver, and I think an object of some concern for this committee in the past. And you said that's what we're doing, why we're doing it. Now, unfortunately, and we've had mothers who have promoted this, and as well as fathers, but we may even have someone here today who's had the unfortunate circumstance. But in just 2016, 9 children here in Virginia died in unlicensed day programs compared to 1 in a licensed facility. So we're not requiring anybody to get licensed that's exempt, but we are requiring certain safety and health standards and basically disclosure to parents of the status of the facility. So that's basically the bill, Mr. Chairman.
All right, sir. Delegate Lang.
Mr. Chairman, my understanding, as Senator Hanger knows, our main focus is on the fiscal impact or not. And my understanding now from what Susan has indicated is that the non-general funds, the block grant fund she mentioned, it would be for fiscal 19, it would be about 43,000 or just a little bit over, and then 143,000 a little bit over in the second year. And I don't think, really from our standpoint, there's a fiscal concern at this point.
Delegate Landis, I think there's a little over, I think there's over about $2 million a year that's sort of available in that funding source. Any other further questions to the Senator? Yes, sir. Well, I will just very quickly. Is there anyone in the audience to speak in favor of Senate Bill 539? Yes, ma'am. You can come forward and identify yourself. Love to smile. Late in the afternoon, love to smile.
Thank you. My name is Betsy Cummings. My son Dylan passed away from a religious exempt child care facility. He was only 7 weeks old. Passed away almost 8 years ago. They never told me that they were exempt. So if this bill had been in place at the time of my son's death, and I had known that they were exempt, I might have been able to do my research and maybe this wouldn't have happened. Also, they laid him on his stomach to sleep in a hot, stuffy electrical storeroom with 9 other babies on a loose fitting sheet and 2 foam pads as a mattress. Completely unsafe sleep conditions for him, which also contributed to his death. So if this bill had been in place when my son passed away, he might still be here and we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So I am here in favor of Senator Hanger's bill, and I ask that you please pass this for my son. Thank you.
Ms. Cummings, I think Dylan would be looking down and smiling right now.
I certainly hope so.
Yes, yes, sir.
Eddie Halef, Virginia Assembly Independent Baptist, we support this bill. We support the efforts that's been done in trying to put a more equal playing field that everybody knows. We've never tried to hide that we're religious exempt, and we feel like that we're just a small group, though, but appreciate the work that's been done. We were part of that study group for that year, and we do appreciate the work that was done by Senator Hanger.
All right, sir, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Charlene Vincent, I'm the Director of Licensing for Children's Programs for the Department of Social Services. The administration and the department support this for the important protections that it puts in place for children in this.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone else? Anyone in opposition to Senate Bill 539? And I would tell the members that it had a very full hearing down at HWI. Chairman Orrock had a very extensive conversations. I know it's had a lot of conversations, and and was very favorably postured this, but as you all recall, we had, Delegate Philcorn had a House Bill 1480 that was tabled in our committee, but at that point in time, it had a $6.2 million general fund fiscal impact. I think that Chairman of the Senate Finance worked pretty hard to get that fiscal sort of change down to, and Susan, I appreciate the advocacy of getting it in posture. So, Delegate Sickles, I think you had a motion. Yes, sir.
As amended.
As amended. And it's probably moved and seconded that Senate Bill 539 be reported as amended. Members, did everybody vote on the electronic board? The measure report passes on a 7-0 vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and for your staff for the assistance.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Senator. All right, Senator Wexler, you've been very patiently waiting. Draw the committee's attention to Senate Bill 893.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Love the smiles. Keep smiling.
Thank you. Well, this is my personal needs allowance bill. I understand that there was a House counterpart, and there's good news and bad news with this bill, as there are with most. The good news is I think everybody agrees from a policy standpoint that it would be wonderful to be able to raise the personal needs allowance for Virginians in nursing homes. The continued good news is that there are federal matching funds available for anything that we are able to put towards this very good purpose. The bad news, of course, is that there does not appear to be any general fund money in either the House or the Senate budgets that have passed. So I certainly understand that this is the beginning of a conversation, and I appreciate that I did not have to go directly after Senator Stanley and his very articulate and passionate arguments. But I anticipate that perhaps in another year we can come back and perhaps try to have a slightly less ambitious figure in order to give these folks some sort of relief.
All right. Members have any questions? Senator Wexler? Anyone in the audience here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 893? Anyone to speak in opposition? All right. If not, probably moved and seconded that Senate Bill 893 be gently passed by. Lay it on the table. All right. And if members will vote on the electronic. Our motion's to lay by. I don't know if they do with your senators, but they don't allow for a further debate, so I assume they do. Yeah. All right, the motion lay on the table passes on a 7-0 vote, and we appreciate your advocacy and sincerely. All right, Senator Donovan, I think you were next.
Thank you.
Draw the committee's attention to Senate Bill 878. Good afternoon, Senator.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr.
Love the
Chairman.
smiles.
Thank you.
There you go.
And they come when we get off earlier like this, right? So 878 is something that you've seen before, and I am curious as to the committee's opinion on this bill, because I do have an alternative if you are going to think of it as you did when it was offered through the House.
All right, Delegate Landis.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the main question is if there's an indeterminate fiscal impact, but we had a lot of discussion with Delegate Stolle to my right here, who had similar legislation, and I understand that this bill also has a clause which leads me to believe that the Senate did not include any funding in the budget in case there was a fiscal impact.
That is all accurate.
Delegate Stolle, you look poised.
I just wouldn't say what a really good bill it is.
So, Mr. Chairman, in light of the fact, so the issue on funding, as you know, and I won't speak to it for very long, has nothing to do with the issue between the relationship from the CSB and the Sheriff's Office, as that is funded by the locality. The reason there's an uncertain fiscal impact is because once an individual was discharged from the jail, having already been connected to the CSB would then be required to take care of it because they're already in their population, provided they didn't have any other coverage or options. Actually, we all know that's how it should be, and that we shouldn't have people that get discharged from jail with 2 days of meds and nowhere to go. But in light of the fact that that's challenging, and we are committed to looking at this in Senate Finance over the next year, I have a proposal for the most important part of this bill, I think potentially, is the part that states standards concerning mental health and substance use
services in local correctional facilities and procedures for enforcing these standards shall be promulgated by the board with the advice of and guidance of the Commissioner of the Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. That means we're going to standardize what the expectations are for care in our jails. It doesn't have a fiscal impact. I'm happy. I have an amendment that strikes all of the language regarding the relationship between the CSB and the sheriff, but I think this is really important for us to not wait another year before we standardize how we manage these issues in jail, so at least with regulations from the department.
Senator Dunn, to answer your question again more forthrightly, I recall one of the conversation points was the prioritization of STEP Virginia, system transformation, and the concern that we would now be sort of jumping. In the code it has that all CSPs have to do emergency management services, and if funds are available, case management. We've now sort of interposed, we've now added to that STEP Virginia 9 or 10 different steps. Last year we put in step 1, if you will, same day access, funded 18 of 40 CSPs. I think this year our intent aspirationally is to fund the other 22 of those. One of the concerns that was raised is we would sort of be putting funding for this particular initiative addressing mental illness in our jails sort of globally, even above some of these other priorities. And I do recall that was one of the points that your former senator and Sheriff Stolle was here and when presenting to that point as well.
But Mr. Chairman, this amendment that I'm proposing is just for the Department of Corrections to promulgate standards for the jails, so that they would have a standardized, I'm happy to give this to the clerk, but that they would standardize their procedures for the best practices for substance abuse and mental health treatment in jails.
Mr. Chairman, can we see the amendment?
Well, and I guess, Senator, just to that point, though, it may need to go to public safety should we look favorably upon that. I'm not trying to dissuade you from the efforts that you're about, but it's a big policy change to say we're now going to sort of address those issues above.
It seems, Mr. Chairman, if I may, that a starting point for us in Virginia, where we've had deaths that have deeply concerned us in the jails, that standardizing how we are, the expectations we're going to set for jails in managing individuals that are there, knowing that 30% of the population have mental health issues, would be a really important thing for Virginia to do.
So, and I'll just have to share this with committee. Basically, our language would in essence, or the functional aspect says, standards concerning mental health and substance abuse services in local correctional facilities and procedures for enforcing these standards shall be promulgated by the board with the advice of and guidance from the Commissioner of Behavioral Health, DBHDS. I have no clue how much that would cost either DBHDS or corrections. This to me would be an unknown fiscal impact. So I understand where you're trying to get, and much less the policy elements and where it would be in public safety.
Mr. Chairman. Well, I guess my question is the substitute properly enforced?
No, I'm executing a little bit of leeway to at least have the conversation. But, all right. Anyone in the audience to speak in favor of the Senate Bill 878? Yes, sir. Come on forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm John Jones, representing the sheriffs. We very much in favor of this bill for 2 or 3 reasons. One is it establishes standards. And if you remember the big bill on mental health we passed last year, this dovetailed right into what the Board of Corrections is supposed to review jail deaths. And the bill that passed last year says that they review jail deaths based on standards. And this is what we need so that the Board of Corrections investigators, they're not doing criminal investigation. The bill didn't say that. It says they're doing a review of a jail death based on standards. So I think they're already looking at it in the Board of Corrections. I can't imagine them meeting and just pulling everyone together to do the standards. So that's one element. And if that becomes a substitute, we would very much support it. The other,
so John, to that point, the developing what the standards should be is one thing. Actually saying they must implement them is another thing altogether. But go ahead, sir.
The other components is that the bill as it is before you is a safety net. There are people in jail that wouldn't be there if they weren't sick. And that's not a good situation. And what this does, they're already being provided as tech-off services by CSBs or other options chosen by the sheriff. But in the event a sheriff sees a situation and he has no one to call, this bill can take care of that. He can call the CSP, he can get a contract, and it's paid for not by the state, but if you look over on it back on page, they took that out. But the bill does have to provide, but the sheriff puts the bill before the local governing body and provides for the payment of the medicine, the food, and the care of the inmate. This is another medical care of the inmate. So we're passionate about it. The sheriff wants the services. We have people in jail that need mental health services, and there's a gap, and this does it. And if you can do just the standard, that would help too.
All right, sir. And Senator Sutton, I'm going to have to acknowledge Doug and Landis in just a second, but the only reason I don't know that we need to engage, it has a clause on it. So if it's not funded in the Senate, then we don't have it in ours. At this juncture, I understand aspirationally where we're going, but we just had a pretty long meeting of full appropriations right before this. And I think the chairman identified at least 4 areas in which there were aspirations, but without design, engineering, or implementation sort of numbers are put to it. And our role here is really to make sure that those numbers sort of work. Delegate Landis.
And I know Delegate Solly has a question too. John, or Senator, the fact remains, I understand what you're saying, but as we see it, and again, when you talk to CSBs, if they then pick up the services after the individual leaves the jail, regional jail, local jail, they then become responsible for those individuals. Now, there is a fiscal impact, and CSBs are funded partly by the Commonwealth, obviously, and partly by the locality. And we've got to determine whether we think the funds would be able to be there going forward. And it is increasing, even though the services, and I understand the way you're describing it, are being picked up in the jail by the locality. Once they come out, just like any other citizen, it becomes our responsibility to partially fund that.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Delegate Solomon.
And just so that I can clarify maybe in my mind, I think we know the underlying bill, what's going to happen with the underlying bill. And so I think the question for us now is whether we want to have a discussion or be able to ask questions on the substitute and see if anyone can answer questions on the substitute to clarify that. So what I would like to do is make a motion on the substitute. If that's agreeable, then we can have that discussion. If we turn down the substitute, then we're back to the original bill. So, Mr. Chairman, I would move the substitute offered by Senator Duckman.
It's been probably moved and seconded. Without objection, by general consensus, it's probably before us. Have you all had a chance to see this?
Mr. Chairman, the point of order I made earlier, I would renew. Unless members have a copy of the substitute, we are not supposed to consider it. And I'm not trying to do harm to what the senator's trying to do, but that is just not the way we do business.
We take about a day. We have to let that go in
Mr. Chairman, do you have other bills? I can go make copies and distribute them to the committee.
We've got 2 other bills here, sorry.
Okay, so if I make copies, may we pass by temporarily and I get you copies of the amendment, the substitute?
All right. Yes, sir. Delegate Aaron? No? All right. We'll take by Senate Bill 878 temporarily. All right, Senator Edwards, I think I saw you next, sir. Draw the committee's attention to Senate Bill 159.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 159 simply sets a standard for the resolution of Medicaid liens in the case of recovery from responsible party, personal injury, or offense. We don't have any standards right now, and the U.S. Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision in 2006 in the Auburn versus Arkansas Department of Social Services case, set forth a standard, and this bill purports to do that. It basically says that the Medicaid lien would be resolved by setting forth the liens granted to the Commonwealth would be the
portion of the claim representing the Medicaid expenses, both medical expenses incurred by the injured party, to do a proportion. I could go walk you through this case. The Auburn case is kind of a complicated case, but basically reduces the lien. It does not provide that the Medicaid lien is 100% of the lien of the recovery. Rather, it's the proportion of the recovery representing the expenses paid by Medicaid. That's basically what it does. And there is the clause.
All right, sir. Members have questions? Delegate Landis. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, we'd ask Senator Edwards, and for those of you in the audience who've heard these questions before. Senator, I note that, first of all, we didn't have a House bill, so this is the first time we've heard this. I appreciate you bringing it before us. But I also noted that there's a $5.2 million fiscal impact in general fund dollars. And I also would note that the Senate of Virginia put on what we like to refer to as the clause, and did not fund it in the budget.
Right. That's right. It still has. It's not going to effect without the money. I'm aware of that.
All right. Delegate, yes, sir.
Just for the people in the audience that may not know what the clause is, the clause reads, the provisions of the bill depending upon funding from the General Assembly. The Senate budget does not fund this. In other words, they do not fund this bill. They put the clause on it, and that's what we're referring to.
My argument is that whether we have the money or not, we have to put the standard on the books, and that goes into effect, that goes into effect. But this is a unanimous decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. And right now we do not have any, what I would call standards for resolving Medicaid liens. There's a process, you go to court, but then the judge says, what am I supposed to do? And this sets in place a proportionate standard of proportionality that the judge can use to resolve the liens. And I say that is the law. That is currently the law of the land as far as my interpretation of the case is concerned.
Senator, just to carry on with or to Delegate Landis, I'm sorry, were you done, sir? Okay. There's one sentence which really struck me: assuming no federal participation, which in that 2006 court, it sounds like the case, they would not be willing to pay for past medical expenses by the state Medicaid program. The full cost of the attorney's fees, along with the state share of the Office of Attorney General recovery effort, would be borne to the Commonwealth at a cost of $3.2 million. Sounds like it's a great lawyer annuity policy for us to now use Medicaid dollars that we otherwise could be clawing back from these recoveries.
Well,
but in fact, actually, a lot of that big chunk of money, first of all, more cases are going to go to court. Second of all, of those cases, the funding would now be sort of taken away from DMAS and actually go to the attorneys involved.
No, because to the injured parties. Right now, we're treating Medicaid recipients as second-class citizens when it comes to recovery of personal injury cases, because they're having to pay proportionally more back to Medicaid than they should. Because Medicaid, let me give you a little just further discussion. Medicaid, if it wants, can sue the responsible party and bear the expenses. They never do that. The plaintiff's attorney goes ahead, files suit, settles the case, and then the plaintiffs have to pay that back to Medicaid, their attorney's fees, or a large portion of it, from the injured party has to pay their share of the settlement back to Medicaid. So the people who are suffering are the injured party. They're being treated as second-class citizens. And the Supreme Court said established a standard which this bill purports to follow.
All right, sir.
They treat the injured parties fairly.
All right, sir. Any further questions? Anyone in the audience to speak in favor of Senate Bill 159? Anyone to speak in opposition of Senate Bill 159? All right. Committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. No,
I appreciate the effort, but I think from our perspective, we have to look at the funding associated with this. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we lay this on the table.
all right, it's been probably moved and seconded that Senate Bill 159 be laid on the
I think too late, Senator Stanley.
No, you've advocated extraordinarily well, Senator Edwards, and I say that sincerely. Members to vote on electronic vote. And Billy, are you? All right, the motion lay on the table, Senate Bill 159, passes on 7-0. All right, so yes, sir. Billy, please step. Come on forward, sir. Draw the committee's attention to.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 310.
Senate Bill 310. Good afternoon, sir. You would tell us what your bill does and why the Commonwealth needs it.
I definitely will. So today, if you have an IDDD individual and you have more than 5 or 6 living in the same neighborhood on the same street, then DMAS says that they'll pull the Medicaid waivers. So this is a very confusing type issue because of federal state regulations. But what this bill does is basically directs DMAS to make recommendations to the General Assembly for legislative, regulatory, or policy changes that provide flexibilities to an individual enrolled in a home community-based waiver to choose his place of residence in the Commonwealth that ensures such individuals' informed choice. Again, choice is the operative word here. A place of residence does not reduce, terminate, suspend, or deny services. So all this does is say, DMAS, we want you to work with the organizations to make sure that there's no true impact and come back with recommended legislative, regulatory, or policy changes. The original bill had a $1.8 billion financial impact. This bill has 0 for financial impact. So huge difference in the two, and the reason for the $1.8 billion impact, as Delegate Jones and I were discussing, was DMAS was under the impression if they did any of these, that they didn't take waivers or I guess cancel the eligibility, then we would lose all Medicaid funding, and that just I don't believe is the case. So what this does is just says DMAS work with them, come up with any regulatory, legislative, or policy changes. There is no financial impact on this now. I believe it's in health tomorrow, in health tomorrow.
So, Senator, I'm looking at the letter from, in the fiscal impact review done by JLAR. However, the impact there says, in addition, Senate Bill 310 could place the state at risk for violating the settlement agreement with DOJ to provide services for individuals with disabilities in the most integrated setting. Have you had a conversation with him or them, or can you give me a comfort level that
We actually have, Mr. Chairman, and the fiscal impact on this has been updated, and the updated one, happy to share it with you, but if you go to the electronic, to our LIS system, the updated one says there is no financial impact. And I'm happy to share that with
we have it, sir. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir, we do. All right. Delegate Landis, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I just wanted to confirm. There is no fiscal impact, and I think staff has noted that. And Senator, this substitute basically is just having the department look at this, which is, it sounds like a very unique situation, and come back with recommendations on how to solve this. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right, sir. Anyone in the audience speak in favor of Senate Bill 310? Anyone to speak in opposition? All right, members, what the Section 1 bill now does, so bring the report back to us. Need a motion. Move report. Probably moved and seconded that Senate Bill 310 be reported. Members will vote on electronic board.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. Have a great day.
You as well, sir. Thank you, Senator. All right, Senator Donovan. It's good to have an older brother on the committee advocating on your behalf to bring something that's new this late in the session to us this afternoon. So please tell us, but if I could just get a motion to at least put this on in front of us. It's fine.
substitute, this language was in the original bill. And we've restricted everything else out of the original bill that was related to the CSV contracting, but the promulgation of standards was in the original bill.
Anything with disability, just trying to get it properly.
Members, let me just tell you what this does. What the Senator is suggesting is that we, in her original Senate Bill 878 that was sent to us as a substitute, she is suggesting that we strike lines 27 through 29, lines 40 through 49, lines 71 through 72, lines 83 through 92, and to replace lines 113 through 127 with this body of work before you, which is lines 30 through 32, and it has the same two enactment clauses. Is that basically correct, Senator?
Yes, sir.
All right. Members understand what she's suggesting?
No. We have a bill before us. Can we ask questions on this?
We don't have the problem before it yet. We don't have the substitute probably before it, so I'm trying to figure out what posture it is in.
Can we debate it at this point, or do we
No.
have to wait?
Not yet, sir.
Got it.
Hang with me.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. The committee come back to order.
There's a great deal of uncertainty about how best to proceed with this. I would withdraw my motion to adopt the substitute.
All right. So given that we're back in the posture of Senate Bill 878 as it was first presented to us earlier this afternoon. Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir. Elliot Landis.
Unless there's further discussion, I have a motion.
Anybody else good? Yeah. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we table the bill.
All right. Then probably moved and seconded that Senate Bill 878 be tabled. Any further discussion? All members vote on the electronic board.
Hold on, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and Senate Bill 878, the motion to lay on the table passes on a 6-2 vote. So, thank you, Senator. All right, members, I think that is our docket for today. For the committee members, members, there, everybody's good? I don't know, I think we have completed our work, so I want to thank you all for your patience with this new subcommittee chairman, and with that, the body will rise.
All right, quit playing. Reading a book.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you how it works. That's kind of the way it does mine. No problem. What amazing. Oh, I did. Oh, I
I see you voted.